Ram Madhavji, Raka Sudhakarji, the other dignitaries, Peddalki, ladies and gentlemen, namaskar to all of you. It's a privilege to be here this morning while we are talking about the progress of Bharat Desh. Because as we move forward with every step that our Honorable Prime Minister takes, we seem to be moving in the direction of progress and development. I think that is the mandate of this government, and I think all of us as citizens of India primarily have to support that cause. This morning, the talk is on, aptly I would say, I like the area of the talk to be given by Ram Madhavji, Look East, Act East, Engage with East. What next? The roadmap for future. I think it's very important to engage with East, and this area of discussion this morning, we all know that East Asia is known as Swarna Bhumi also, Swarna Dvipa as well. And I think the Bangkok airport is now called Swarna Bhumi. And as you walk into the airport, you have a huge picture of Samudra Manthan, and that's the impact of Indian culture. But before, I embark on giving a few ideas from my perspective, primarily the cultural aspect, I think it's very important to congratulate Raka Sudhakarji and his team for building the awareness in action, forum. I think this fora has focused not just on the intellectual aspect of progress and growth, but also the cultural domain of India. Let me congratulate you, Raka Sudhakarji, for this very important speech this morning. Ram Madhavji, of course, we know him for his scholastic, erudite, and hands-on experience with East Asia and other realms of Indian progress and growth. Ram Madhavji, I'm honored to be here on days with you. I'm not a political person. Being an academic, I would look at it a little differently. And this morning, when we look at this area, I'm reminded of P.V. Narasimha Raoji, our erstwhile Prime Minister, who brought in the East Asia policy, and Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji, who took it forward. And we had 2 decades of growth and progress. And that is where we find that the tiger economies, as East Asian economies were known for, the world came to recognize the power of East Asia. So when we embark on AEP, the Act East policy, what does it mean? It means that are we reinvigorating? Are we reviving the vision of P.V. Narasimha Rao ji or Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji? I think we are doing both, but our Prime Minister has also brought in a multi-dimensional, built on the multi-dimensional frontiers of India's ties with East Asia, and that is where I thought that we are on a nascent growth trajectory in East Asia policy. Because when Act East policy came about, one of the first things that the Prime Minister did was not just to reinvigorate its relation with ASEAN countries, to go beyond the region and encompass the Koreas in the north, Australia and New Zealand in the south, from neighboring Bangladesh to Fiji, to Pacific Island countries, to the Far East. This has expanded the boundaries of our relationship. So it's very important to remember that the growth trajectory that has been brought in by India. The leadership that is being provided by our present government, I think that is something that we need to appreciate in terms of how the fulcrum of global geopolitics is shifting to Asia. Now, that was the focus when we started with Act East policy. One of the things that I was very impressed, being an academic, was the allocation of $1 billion in the summit in November of 2014 for significant building on the matrix of the 3 Cs, as it is known: culture, commerce, and connectivity. I think this has to do with vast-ranging areas of subject. It was Henry Ford who once said that, coming together is the beginning. Keeping together is success, and working together is progress. I think Act East policy is all about the progress that we would like to, find effectively harnessed in the coming years. It's also important to remember that when we talk about culture, how do we move forward? And where culture is concerned, it's very important to look at how the East Asian countries were together, and India had an impact, had its roots in the entire East Asia from 200 BC. For nearly 1,000 years now, we find that India has had a tremendous impact on the entire Asia. One of the example is the Ramayana. Ramayana has 300 versions in the East Asia, leave alone the versions in India. There are about 300 versions in East Asia, starting from Malaysia to the Buddhist, to the Chinese version, to the Indonesian and other countries. So the vast range of impact of the Indian culture, Indian theology is tremendous. I was just reading this gentleman, Hugh Shee, the former ambassador of US to China, who said that India has had an impact on China for several centuries. He said for 20 centuries, India has ruled over China culturally without sending a single soldier. That's what he said. And I think that's something that one must acknowledge: the power of India, the cultural wealth of India, the traditions of India that have left its impact on the entire Southeast Asia. And I think we need to have a repository. When Prime Minister Modi ji spoke about connectivity, I think it's very important, apart from the tri-party connection, the rail and the other connections that he has spoken about. The cultural connect is very important. The people-to-people connect is very important. Institution-to-institution connect is very important. Educational institutions play a big role. While we harness a memoranda of understandings with the Western and European universities, we don't look into our neighborhood. I think it is time that we start looking at our neighborhood and forging ties with them. It's very important to build a repository of knowledge that has been existent for centuries. And I think that is where institutions can help. And probably when one talks about culture, commerce, and connectivity coming together, I think it's important to look at how each one of us, each institution, each individual can contribute. I believe that we as general public or citizens, we would like to comment and criticize our government without understanding the basic matrix of growth and progress. And I think we need to be part of that matrix of growth and progress. And that can happen only when we contribute. So each one of us in our individual way needs to do that. And if you go back into history, I would just like to mention one more point and leave the expertise to Ram Madhavji to talk about the roadmap and to Act East policy in the future. And that is, if we go back into history, I think 11th century, we had Rajaraja Chola, who had, advanced and annexed Malaysia and other countries, Sri Lanka, and then his son Rajendra Chola also moved and he captured, annexed Indonesia. Now remember, this annexation is without plundering. There have been conquests with plunder. This is a conquest in terms of culture, I would say, terms of geopolitical reach. And if we've had that kind of a long-standing roots in growth and progress reaching out, I think Act East policy is perhaps in the recent growth radar of India or the world, is probably the best initiative that could ever have been taken. I compliment the government for taking it forward, and I hope and wish that we move forward with escalating speed and scale up the influence of India on other countries, and how East Asia, how collaborative spirit can bring more progress to Southeast Asia. Truly a Swarna Bhumi, I think, be it in terms of maritime or the naval strategies, or in terms of economy, or in terms of education and culture. I think we have a lot to achieve. And this morning, Ram Madhav ji will now tell us how we need to move forward. Thank you.